There was silence in the courtroom. The judge scowled down at the silent youngster in front of him, and all eyes were on him. Since entering the courtroom, the child, whose name was Ethan Walker, had seldom spoken. His hands were in his pockets as he stood, his untidy brown hair partially hiding his face and making it impossible to discern his emotions. He didn't feel anxious. He was not afraid. He simply existed. Known for his impatience and caustic language, Judge Morton scoffed. Leaning forward, he looked down at Ethan as if he were staring at a pitiful object. Well, the judge replied in a sarcastic tone. What's in here? A young man who's too scared to talk. Or perhaps you simply don't get what's happening. The audience burst out laughing, but Ethan remained unfazed. The judge grinned. I assume you're among the young people who believe they're too intelligent for everyone. He shook his head and leaned back. Children like you never make it. Everyone's time is being wasted by you. Is there even a brain within your head? Or is it just a blank area? The room echoed with a few laughs. Then Ethan did something out of the blue. He raised his head slowly and met Judge Morton's eyes. Then he said something. He spoke steadily and calmly. But what he said, the courtroom fell hushed as he spoke. Ethan answered, Actually, Your Honor, if you're done making fun of me, I'd like to fix the error in your decision before an innocent man is put in jail. The face of Judge Morton went white. There was a gasp in the courtroom. The attorneys at the table quickly turned their heads. It was a miracle they didn't break their necks. Everyone then understood that Ethan Walker was more than just a quiet adolescent. He was brilliant. 3 weeks prior, Ethan was writing in his notebook while seated at the rear of his Roosevelt High School classroom. The other pupils were giving notes to one another, laughing and conversing. Ethan was unconcerned. He'd known for a long time that he wasn't one of them. He wanted friends, but that wasn't the point. Simply put, whenever he opened his mouth, people became either disinterested or perplexed. So he said nothing. He read quantum physics texts, worked through logic problems, and broke into random systems. Just to see if he could, nothing unlawful. However, domestic life presented a distinct set of difficulties. In order to provide for their family, his mother, Lisa Walker, worked 2 jobs. They had nothing but bills and unfulfilled promises after his father left years ago. Ethan wished to assist, but what was a 16-year-old to do? He was looking through court case files on the internet one evening, something he enjoyed doing. At that point, he happened onto a court case that made him sick to his stomach. Daniel Grayson, a man, was facing charges for a crime he had not committed. Daniel was unknown to Ethan, but the case's evidence was faulty. There was something the prosecutors had failed to see. A tiny but crucial error that could mean the difference between freedom and incarceration. All night long, Ethan continued to delve deeper. He examined documents, verified timestamps, and even gained access to court records that were not intended for public use. He had evidence by the next morning. However, there was an issue. Who would pay attention to him? No one at 16 years old? Ethan spent days reaching out to reporters, attorneys, and everyone else who would listen. However, they all disregarded him. Until everything changed after a last-ditch call. When Ethan urged that they go to the courthouse, Lisa Walker was so worn out from work that she hardly had the energy to resist. She rubbed her temples and murmured, Ethan, this is crazy. You are not an attorney. You're a child. But Ethan said, I'm right. I can prove it, Mom. She took him against her better judgment. Thus, Ethan found himself in Judge Morton's courtroom, where a man's destiny was at stake, where everything will be changed by a boy who no one took seriously. However, the courtroom doors suddenly sprang open as Ethan was ready to share what he had discovered. With their hands on their rifles, 2 officers charged in. Now move away from the bench. Among them, one yelled. Ethan stopped. His mom let out a gasp. The judge's expression changed from pale to enraged. What does this signify? Ethan was pointed at by one cop. The court's database was compromised by this child. We suspect that he has been unlawfully accessing secret material. Throughout the courtroom, there were gasps. Ethan felt his heart race. This was not intended to occur. He should not have been in trouble. Instead of making a mistake, he was attempting to prevent one. However, Ethan Walker was on the verge of being imprisoned rather than demonstrating Daniel Grayson's innocence. Ethan's wrists were snagged by the icy steel handcuffs. Despite his racing heart, he forced himself to remain composed. Chaos broke out in the courtroom, the crowd muttering, his mother yelling, and the judge smashing his gavel in exasperation. "Place your order. The court is in order." Judge Morton's cheeks flushed with rage as he gave a yelp. He looked over to the cops. "What does this signify? This lad, this quiet, unimpressive youngster, hacked into government papers, is that right?" "Your Honor," indeed. It was confirmed by one of the cops. "A security alert regarding an illegal system compromise was sent to us. It was traced back to the laptop of this child." Lisa Walker stood up, trembling as she spoke. "This is an error. My son does not commit crimes. He was merely attempting to assist." Ethan looked at the judge, still unnaturally composed. "If you'll allow me to explain, Your Honor." "Quiet." The judge let forth a yell. Clearly attempting to take it all in, he stroked his temples. "Do you mean to tell me that you compromised court documents?" Ethan inhaled deeply. He had an option: admit the truth and risk everything, or deny everything and hope they let him go. He went with the truth. "Your Honor, indeed. I had access to case files, but not to hurt anyone." He spoke steadily. "I discovered a mistake in your decision. An innocent man will be punished if Daniel Grayson is sent to prison." The courtroom became silent. Judge Morton paused as well, surprised by Ethan's assurance. The middle-aged prosecutor, dressed in a sharp suit, scoffed and folded his arms. "What gives you the impression that a youngster is more knowledgeable than the attorneys who handled this case?" Ethan looked at the man as he turned his head. "Since they erred in judgment, I can also demonstrate it." Judge Morton's gaze narrowed. "All right, given your apparent self-confidence, explain me what went wrong." Ethan inhaled deeply. "Your Honor, security footage from a bank robbery is the basis for the case against Daniel Grayson," he said. "He entered the bank at 9:42 a.m., according to the prosecution, which utilized a timestamp to pinpoint his whereabouts. However, that video was altered." The prosecutor gave an eye roll. "That is absurd." Ignoring him, Ethan went on. "When the original file was submitted as evidence, it was compressed. Metadata is changed as a result. I discovered discrepancies in the publicly accessible copy of the film after performing a forensic examination." The judge scowled. "What discrepancies are there?" Ethan spoke with confidence and clarity. "The video's lighting. The movie purports to be at a certain time of day, but the shadow angles don't match. At 9:42 a.m., the sun was expected to be rising from the east. However, it is positioned in the film as though it were nearly noon. The timestamp was changed by someone." There were murmurs in the courtroom. The prosecutor's face flushed. "This is ridiculous. He is only a child. You want us to think he was a better security footage analyst than a group of experts?" Ethan did not recoil. "Just play the original video from the bank security system, and you won't need to believe me. Examine it against the court-submitted file. I'll accept full responsibility if I'm mistaken." The judge reclined in his chair and looked at Ethan with fresh curiosity. He had lost the haughtiness he had displayed earlier. His eyes were filled with something else instead. Curiosity, perhaps. He turned to one of the court bailiffs and said, "Officer, get in touch with the bank and ask for the original video." The prosecutor's hands smashed against the table. "This is a waste of time, Your Honor." The judge glanced at him. "It is you who asserts that the evidence is strong. You have nothing to be concerned about, then, if this child is mistaken." Despite clenching his jaw, the prosecutor remained silent. Ethan's mother held her breath and watched with wide eyes. A few minutes later, a court official returned with a laptop. "Your Honor," he murmured, panting a little. "A live copy of the bank's unedited video was sent to us." The judge bent forward. "Play it." As the official hit play, everyone in the courtroom held their breath. The screen flickered with black and white footage. Customers, a few tellers behind the counter, the interior of the bank, and the moment of truth were all depicted. The doors opened at precisely 9:42 a.m., and a man entered. It wasn't Daniel Grayson, though. It was someone else. The room was filled with gasps. Lisa quickly put her palm to her mouth. The prosecutor's face became white. The eyes of Judge Morton grew wide. "Well," he mumbled, "I'll be damned." Ethan's head cocked slightly. The timestamp was phony, as I mentioned. For a while, Judge Morton sat with his gavel dangling over his desk. He turned to the prosecutor slowly after that. "You must have an explanation for this, don't you?" The man lost his confidence and stammered. Judge Morton interrupted him with a raised hand, saying, "Why, Your Honor, I don't understand how." "Enough." He let out a breath and looked back at Ethan. "Are you saying that you worked this out on your own?" Ethan gave a nod. "Indeed, sir." After examining him for a considerable amount of time, the judge chuckled quietly. "Well," he repeated, "I'll be damned. In my 20 years as a judge, I have never witnessed anything like this." He turned to face the officers who were still standing next to Ethan. "Remove the handcuffs from him. Right now." After a brief pause, they unclicked the metal around Ethan's wrists and complied. Ethan rubbed his hands, the cuffs' firm hold turning his skin red. His mother was staring at him as if he were a stranger, so he turned to face her. "Morton," the judge cleared his throat. "Personally, I'll make sure Daniel Grayson's case is looked into right away. Regarding you, young man, I'm not sure if I should offer you a job or reprimand you for breaking into court documents." The courtroom echoed with laughter. Ethan only shrugged a little. "I don't want a job," he declared. "I simply did not want to see the incarceration of an innocent guy." Slowly, Judge Morton nodded. "You're a brave child with a sharp mind." However, the courthouse doors exploded once more before anyone could rejoice. Unreadable, a man in a black suit rushed in. He approached the judge directly and spoke softly into his ear, and the judge's face transformed in an instant. He clenched his jaw. His hands were on his desk's edge. His eyes were sharper than ever when he turned back to Ethan. Carefully, he replied, "You must accompany us, young man." "Now." Ethan scowled. "Why?" The tone of Judge Morton's voice was solemn. "You weren't the only one who looked at the case, it turns out." Ethan felt sick to his stomach. There was a problem, something significant, and two more officers came forward before he had a chance to comprehend it. And they weren't only there to clear things up this time. Something far, far worse was the reason they were here. The two officers flanked Ethan before he could even respond. Their faces were unreadable. His mother screamed in panic and grabbed for him. One of the cops, however, raised a hand. "Remain back, ma'am," the taller one remarked. The voice of Lisa Walker trembled. "What are you doing? He was just cleared by you. There was nothing wrong with him." Judge Morton's expression was grim. Something far more serious took the place of his typical cockiness. He looked across to Ethan. "You must accompany us, son. Right now." Ethan's mind worked quickly. It wasn't only the judge's harshness. He was exercising caution. No longer was he shouting at him or making fun of him. That implied that whatever was taking place was not limited to the courtroom. Before turning back to Judge Morton, Ethan offered his mother the tiniest nod in response to her anxious look. "All right," he said, "but you must explain the situation to me." The man who had whispered in the judge's ear, dressed in a black suit, came forward. He had a neatly ironed tie, his hair slicked back, and the blank look that only comes with years of secrecy. "Agent Carter is my name," he added. "The federal government employs me." His heart skipped a beat. The federal government? Agent Carter took a tiny tablet out of his coat and looked at a few pictures. He then flipped it around for Ethan to see. The breath escaped Ethan's lungs. There was a security lock on the screen. Not from the courtroom. Not from any local system. The Department of Justice was the source. And there it was, Ethan's name. Ethan was in his small bedroom 12 hours prior, with only the glow from his laptop for illumination. He had been engrossed in Daniel Grayson's case for the past few nights, going through security footage, court paperwork, and old files that most people were unaware existed. He had no intention of breaking the law. All he wanted was the truth. However, an odd thing occurred when he gained access to the courthouse database. There was a security tag on the file he was looking for, Grayson's original case files. It wasn't typical. Unless they were classified, court records were not meant to be subject to such restrictions. Nevertheless, the system flagged him each time he attempted to access it. He became aware that something was wrong at that point. This case wasn't reviewed by anyone, and the person in charge had the ability to conceal it at the highest level. For the next hour, Ethan had been attempting to get past the security warning. He had no intention of concealing his actions. All he needed to know was the reason for marking the specific case. Then his screen abruptly turned blank. A single red text message appeared. Access is restricted. Trace started. Ethan felt sick to his stomach. Something had been set off by him. Something significant. However, the power in his entire home flickered before he could turn everything off. It was completely dark for 5 seconds. Ethan sensed someone was after him as the lights returned. As he stood in the courtroom now, Ethan understood exactly what had transpired. Daniel Grayson wasn't the only person involved. That case had been marked for a reason. Additionally, Ethan had stumbled over something far larger than he had anticipated when attempting to discover the truth. The tablet was put away by Agent Carter. "You have access to federal government papers, Mr. Walker. That is a grave transgression." Ethan gulped, but his face remained expressionless. He claimed that I wasn't attempting to commit any crimes. All I needed to know was the reason behind the setup of an innocent man. A tiny line formed on Agent Carter's lips. "That's precisely what we need to discuss." Judge Morton rubbed his chin and stood. "I take that this talk isn't supposed to take place here, Agent Carter?" Carter gave a nod. "We must relocate him to a safe area." Lisa Walker, her hands trembling, moved ahead of Ethan. "No, my son is not going anywhere with you. He is only a child." Carter studied her for a moment. Then, unexpectedly, his tone grew softer. "Ma'am, I swear to you, he is not in danger. However, he is in danger, and he must accompany us if you wish to protect him." Lisa paused now. The fear in her eyes was visible to Ethan. Squeezing her hand, he extended his arm. He murmured softly, "Mom, I'll be all right." Her breathing was labored as she shook her head. "I don't get it. Why is this taking place?" Ethan faced Carter once more. "Yes, why is this taking place?" Carter lowered his voice after taking a quick look around the room. "Because of the case you just revealed, child? It wasn't merely an error." Ethan felt his heart race. "What are you saying?" Carter had a serious expression in his eyes. "Daniel Grayson was wanted in prison, after all. You simply got in the way of something hazardous if you discovered the truth." Quiet. And then bang. A gunshot reverberated across the courthouse. There were screams. People sprang for shelter. A second shot rang out, and Lisa dragged Ethan down. A man in a dark hoodie rushed inside the courtroom with his gun lifted as the doors swung wide. Carter reached for his radio. "There has been a breach. We now require backup." The armed man made no hesitation. He ran directly at Ethan after making eye contact. Ethan stiffened his body. He was to be silenced. They weren't merely attempting to arrest him now, either. They wanted to murder him. It was a slow-motion universe. The gunman surged for Ethan before he could even respond. He felt the heat of a bullet zipping by his ear as he ducked, his heart racing. Following the gunshot's thunderous crack, there were terrified screams. "Get down!" Agent Carter yelled and quickly pulled out his handgun. Lisa Walker held on to Ethan, using her body as a shield. "Ethan," she cried, "please stay down, baby." Ethan, however, was aware. This attack wasn't a random one. This was the aim. He was desired by someone. With a muttered curse, Judge Morton jumped behind the bench. Court officials hurried to draw their weapons. However, the gunman moved quickly, slicing through the confusion while keeping Ethan in sight. "He is available to me." Ethan felt a chill go through his body at the realization. Once more, the shooter raised his pistol and fired. Ethan was jerked backward at the last second by a powerful hand. The wooden railing where he had been standing moments before was destroyed by the gunshot. Carter was the one. The agent pushed Ethan toward the exit and yelled, "Move. Now we're leaving this place." The gunman was wrestled to the ground by 2 officers who tackled him. Ethan knew it wasn't over even if the gun clattered across the floor. There might be more than one assassin. Carter took Ethan by the wrist and pulled him to the courtroom's side door. He yelled to another agent, "Get him out of here," and shoved Ethan into the man's embrace. Carter stopped Lisa as she attempted to follow. "We'll protect him, ma'am. Remain down." Although Ethan's heart was screaming no, he understood that protesting would only make things take longer. The agent virtually carried him as they hurried, sweeping him into a back passage. Outside the courthouse, the sirens of the police blared. "Who was that?" Between breaths, Ethan gasped. The agent tightened his hold on his arm. Someone who is opposed to your survival. Ethan was pushed into the back of a black SUV a few minutes later. As they sped out of the courthouse, the doors slammed and the tires shrieked. Breathing heavily, Carter climbed into the passenger seat. He looked across to the driver. Any indication of a chase? All clear, said the driver. Ethan tried to control his breathing by pressing his palms against the cool leather seat for the time being. Could someone please explain the situation? Carter rubbed his temples and let out a breath. Kid, you don't understand. That shooter wasn't just anybody. You're being watched by a strong person. You reveal something more significant than you think. Ethan's fists clenched. Tell me what it is then. Carter paused. He took a long look at Ethan, examining him. Then at last he spoke something. The case of Daniel Grayson, he said. It was more than a setup. T was a cover-up. Additionally, you just tore off the lid of something that people would kill to keep hidden. Ethan took a deep breath. Oh, Carter swiveled in his chair, turning to face him. I'm not sure yet. However, we will soon find out. Ethan was drawn further into a scheme that would reveal the truth or result in his death as the SUV raced toward an unidentified location. And he had no idea which would happen first at this point. Like a shark slicing through water, the SUV rushed down the highway, swerving between traffic. The tension in the air was palpable to Ethan. Every few seconds, Carter's eyes darted to the side mirrors, searching for any indication that they were being followed. Ethan's thoughts were racing. Someone had attempted to murder him, not merely to frighten or warn him. Then he found himself in a speeding car with a federal agent who could be his only lifeline. Ethan inhaled deeply. Where are we heading? Carter remained focused on the road, somewhere secure. Ethan scowled. That isn't a response. Carter let out a sigh. You must comprehend something, child. It's far larger than you think you're in the middle of. The individuals responsible for this, they don't engage in gaming. Ethan's fists clenched. Then describe what I entered. Carter paused. There was a long silence before he spoke. Daniel Grayson's case, which you solved, was more than a simple oversight. The case was closed. Not just by a judge either. Ethan gasped in surprise. Who sealed it? Carter's tone was solemn. By a government official. Ethan felt a shiver go down his back. That's not logical, he said. What is the government's motivation for framing an innocent man? Carter gave a headshake. It has nothing to do with him. It concerns what he observed. Ethan straightened his posture. What are you saying? Carter gave him a look. He clenched his jaw. His face was unreadable. Daniel Grayson was a finance professional. He wasn't just a stranger. He worked as an auditor. And he discovered something 3 months ago. Disparity in federal funding. Missing are millions of dollars. Ethan's heartbeat accelerated. Was money being stolen? Carter gave a nod. They also wanted him to keep quiet. Ethan felt nauseous. Thus, they set him up, gave him a criminal appearance. Carter let out a breath. That's right. Ethan combed his hair with his hand. His thoughts were racing through his head. However, if I was able to find that out, then I know who set him up. Ethan only needed Carter's quiet as confirmation. He was in danger. Grave risk. The SUV turned into a private lane that led into the woods after veering off the freeway. A little, dilapidated cabin appeared. Carter looked at Ethan as the driver killed the engine. You stay here for the time being. Ethan took a quick look at the cabin. Really? A spooky cabin in a remote location? Carter grinned. What? Are you hoping for a 5-star hotel? Ethan let out a sigh. All right. However, I will require my laptop. Carter's eyebrow went up. For what purpose? Ethan spoke steadily. I will track down anyone in the government is responsible for this. Carter stopped grinning. You have no idea what you're up against, kid. Ethan looked him in the eye. I believe I do. After examining him for a while, Carter let out a sigh. You're either the smartest or the dumbest child I've ever encountered. Ethan gave a shrug. Most likely both. Carter shook his head and laughed. Enter. I will pick up your laptop. Ethan exited the SUV and ventured into the uncharted. However, one thing was evident. He wasn't rushing. He was going to defend himself, and he would reveal the truth. Whatever it took. The scent of dust and ancient would fill the cabin. Ethan entered and looked around. There was only a bed, a desk, and a rusty stove in the corner of the tiny room. The table was empty save for a few papers and maps strewn all over it. Carter locked the door behind them as Ethan turned to face him. What comes next? Carter went to a tiny cabinet, took out a metal box, and set it on the table. When he opened it, he found a revolver, a satellite phone, and several file stacks. "We kept quiet," Carter stated, "until I discover who is responsible. Anyway," Ethan folded his arms. "Are you advising me to do nothing? That isn't taking place." Carter looked at him. "I just got you out of a courtroom, kid, where someone was attempting to shoot you in the head." Ethan let out a quick exhale. "You don't get to argue with me." He was aware of the risk, yet he couldn't afford to do nothing. He moved to the desk and took a seat. "Give me my laptop if you want me to keep out of trouble." Carter let out a sigh. "Do you truly believe that you can outsmart the folks we're interacting with?" Ethan grinned. "I've done it once already." A hand swept through Carter's short hair. "You're not possible." From the floor, he picked up a duffel bag and threw it onto the bed. "It is everything you need. Laptop, chargers, phone burner. You do anything foolish." I cut the power. Ethan took his laptop out of the bag after unzipping it. The screen's recognizable hue made me feel at home. Sitting opposite from him, Carter kept a close eye on everything. "What are you going to do?" Ethan tapped the keyboard with his fingertips. "Easy. The documents are still available if Daniel Grayson discovered anything prior to being falsely accused. All I need to do is follow the trail." Carter reclined. "What if you discover something that they would prefer you not to see?" Ethan made no hesitation. "I'll then see to it that everyone sees it." Ethan was well into the system 2 hours later. He was now staring at something that made his breath catch after he had gotten past 3 firewalls and redirected his connection through encrypted servers. A list, thousands of transactions, private accounts, saw large inflows and outflows of funds. However, the names associated with them were not only arbitrary individuals. They were representatives of the government. With his arms folded, Carter stood behind him. "Didn't you just discover the smoking gun?" Ethan's heart pounded as he flipped through the folders. This is an attempt to launder money. Money being transferred onto private accounts after being stolen from government programs. It's enormous. Carter's eyes narrowed. To what extent does it ascend? Ethan selected a file with the Priority 1 designation. One name appeared at the top of the screen once it had loaded. Carter inhaled deeply. No. Ethan's fists clenched around his body. Not just any dishonest official was the name displayed on the screen. It was a high-ranking government official, a senator. Carter spoke softly. This has the potential to topple an entire branch of government if it spreads. Ethan gave him a look. Thus, in order to keep it buried, they were prepared to kill. The lights flickered in the cabin before Carter could react. There was a brief hiccup on Ethan's screen. Only one warning appeared. "We've found you." Ethan felt his blood freeze. Carter reached for his firearm. "They located us." Outside, Ethan felt a rush of adrenaline as he heard tires squealing on gravel. Trees are sliced through by headlights. SUVs in black. Several. Carter shoved papers into a bag, moving quickly. "We're heading out. Right now." Ethan took the duffel and slammed his laptop down. "How'd they find us?" Carter tightened his jaw. "Not important. Get moving." The doors of the first SUV opened. Armed men wearing black military gear emerged. No badges. No insignias. They weren't law enforcement. They were worse. Ethan's chest grew constricted. Whoever they weren't there to take him into custody. Their purpose was to destroy him. Carter took hold of his arm. "We're heading to the rear. Keep running." Ethan nodded and gulped hard. Next, the cabin glass was broken by the first bullet. They had hardly seconds to get away. What if they didn't relocate right away? They had passed away. Glass fragments flew throughout the room as the bullet ripped through the cabin window. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he reflexively ducked. "Proceed," Carter yelled and pulled him to the rear entrance. The wood was splintered as the second bullet struck the wall close to Ethan's head. Time was running out. They ran into the thick woodland behind the cabin when Carter pushed open the rear door. There were moist leaves and roots all over the uneven ground. Ethan's breath came in sharp spurts as he strained to keep up. There were shouts from behind them. "They're in motion." Before they get to the road, Take them out. A tree a few inches from Ethan's shoulder was struck by a third gunfire. He made himself go more quickly. He was clueless about their destination. He just knew they were dead if they stopped. Ethan was pushed forward as Carter swerved to the right. Continue running. Don't turn around. Even though Ethan's legs burned, he continued. He pushed through the dense undergrowth, jumped over fallen logs, and dived under branches. As they approached, the sound of boots stomping on the woodland floor became more distinct. They're catching up to us. Ethan let out a gasp. Carter muttered an expletive. We must lose them. When they arrived at a tiny area, Carter abruptly took hold of Ethan's arm and dragged him behind a big down tree. He touched his lips with a finger. Keep quiet. Ethan's pulse pounded as he knelt down. They were being pursued by men who were not amateurs. Professionals, they moved in formation, sweeping through the foliage with their rifles. Now the voices were near. They were unable to travel very far. Sweep the area. Somewhere here they are. Ethan held his breath. He knew he couldn't use his laptop right now, but it was still in the duffel bag he threw over his shoulder. Any noise would reveal them. Carter drew his pistol and muttered, We fight if they discover us. Ethan's throat became parched. He wasn't a combatant. He was merely an inquisitive child. Now, though, he was now in the midst of something actual. The sound of footsteps increased. Ethan felt his heart race. His fingers found the tree's hard bark. Only a few feet separated the males. Then, over a radio, a voice crackled. Take a step back. There is activity close to the major road. The men paused. One of them. It might be a ruse. Once more, the radio crackled. Not important. We must leave. A long pause ensued. Then the footsteps began to fade away. Ethan remained still. He was scarcely breathing. With his rifle in hand, Carter also remained motionless as he watched the individuals vanish into the night. They bided their time. A minute. 2. At last, Carter let out a breath. They have vanished. Ethan's breath came out shakily. It came really close. Carter stood looking around. Too near. He looked across to Ethan. Hurry up. We must continue to move. Ethan nodded and gulped hard. They were not secure. Not quite yet. They arrived at an empty service road an hour later. Carter guided Ethan to a secret car. A dark SUV parked in dense vegetation. Carter opened the trunk, took out a new outfit, and tossed it to Ethan. Put these on. Ethan lowered his gaze to himself. His clothes were muddy and his sweater was ripped. It had not occurred to him that he was a complete mess. After a brief change, he got into the passenger seat. Sliding behind the wheel, Carter turned on the engine. Ethan faced him. Now, where are we heading? Carter's hand gripped the steering wheel more firmly. They won't find us there. Ethan's gaze narrowed. Then what? Carter let out a sigh. We then determined who was responsible for this. Ethan's thoughts were racing. They had witnessed the proof. They were aware of a senator's involvement. However, that was only the beginning. Who else participated in this? Furthermore, how far would they go to conceal their secrets? The SUV vanished into the night as it thundered down the road. Ethan was certain of one thing. This was not the end of it. Not even close. The SUV's headlights illuminated the deserted road ahead as it sliced through the night. With his fingers clutching his laptop, Ethan sat in the passenger seat. He continued mentally reliving everything. The men who had just attempted to kill them, the assault in the courthouse, and the senator's name being found in the files. His hands shook a little. This was new to him. He was neither a fugitive nor a spy. As a young child who enjoyed solving riddles, he caught sight of something he shouldn't have. Carter saw his hands trembling. He said, "Breathe, kid. You freeze and perish. Remain alert." Ethan tried to settle himself and let out a slow exhale. Even so, where are we heading? Carter's mouth tightened. Keep safe. It's around 50 kilometers away. No electronics. Not connected. Not a trace. Ethan scowled. You don't believe me? Carter gave him a glance. Not the problem. Someone discovered us in a matter of minutes after you broke into the top echelons of government. Everywhere they look, we are now off the grid. The thought of hiding made Ethan miserable. He had to concede, though, that Carter was right. Those pursuing them were hardly amateurs. They had assets. They were powerful. And worst of all, They had no trouble taking lives to keep their secrets safe. The SUV bounced a little as it struck a rocky section of road. Ethan gripped the laptop tighter. So he said, "What is the strategy?" Carter didn't lose sight of the road. "We kept quiet. I'll make a few phone calls. Determine who we can rely on." Ethan gave a headshake. "That is insufficient." Carter gave a quick exhale. "Youngster, I am aware that you consider yourself to be a genius." Ethan interrupted. "I am a genius. I'm telling you too. It won't be resolved by hiding. We got the evidence. The names are with us. We made them public." Carter gave a little chuckle. "Expose them? To whom? Do you think this will be featured in the news? Do you think a senator will be arrested by the police?" He gave a head shake. "This is more significant than that. This level of corruption? It is protected. The wrong person is the one you go to. Additionally, you'll only increase your target size." Ethan remained quiet for a while. Admittedly, he detested it. Carter, however, was correct. They couldn't simply post the files online and cross their fingers. They required a plan. Ethan thought as he drummed his fingers on his laptop. What if a weak link is discovered? Carter gave him a look. "What?" Ethan straightened his posture. "Individuals don't commit such serious crimes by themselves. We flip someone who is terrified and has a connection to the operation, but is at a lower level." Carter nodded slowly as he finished. "Make them speak." Ethan grinned. "That's right." Carter was silent for a while. Then he spoke. "Kid, you're dangerous." Ethan's eyebrows went up. "Because I'm intelligent?" Carter gave a head shake. "Thus you are unsure of when to stop." Ethan merely looked straight ahead. There was no stopping. No more. The SUV arrived at a distant petrol station on an empty road an hour later. A neon sign that flickered and the faint glimmer of a security camera over the door were the only sources of light. Carter turned off the engine. "Remain here. I'll go get supplies." As Carter got out of the car and headed toward the store, Ethan nodded. Ethan unlocked his laptop and started working as soon as he was by himself. He had no intention of waiting. They wanted to know who to target if they were going to turn someone inside this operation. His fingertips skimmed the keyboard, retrieving files that were encrypted. Searching for something, he scrolled over the senator's transactions. Anything that caught the eye. Then he noticed it. A moniker. Finch Jacob. Ethan pressed the button. A tiny profile appeared. Finch was connected to the bank accounts utilized in the money laundering scam and was a mid-level government contractor. He was close enough to know the actual players, but he wasn't at the top. And there was more. Ethan's gaze expanded. He attempted to retreat. Finch was seen moving money, relocating assets, and attempting to vanish in a number of transactions that were highlighted. He was afraid. Ethan's heartbeat accelerated. It was this. Finch wished to leave. Thus, they had a chance if they reached him first. Ethan grabbed his phone from the burner. He had to inform Carter. Then he noticed the window's reflection. A shadow is approaching the SUV. His stomach fell. There was a figure behind him. A palm smashed over his mouth before he could even turn. The door opened with a jerk. Ethan fought, kicking frantically, but they were powerful. They dragged him out of the SUV and into the dark. Ethan's skull slammed against the coarse gravel as he fell hard to the ground. His vision exploded with stars, and for a moment, he was totally lost. He didn't have time to heal, though. He was dragged up by a powerful hand that caught him by the collar. In his ear came a harsh, low voice that hissed, "Give up fighting." Ethan twisted and thrashed with everything he had, ignoring the order. His assailant hardly batted an eye when he kicked at their shin. Out of the darkness, a second figure emerged. One of them put a gun to Ethan's ribs. The second voice warned, "If you do it again, you won't get another chance." Ethan stopped. The first man leaned in, still holding him firmly. "Have you not been a very industrious little hacker?" Ethan tightened his jaw. The man's breath smelled of sweat and cigarettes. These folks, whatever they were, weren't your typical gangsters. They were experts. From the SUV, the second man retrieved Ethan's laptop bag and slung it over his shoulder. "Your babysitter is where?" "Carter." Ethan felt his heart race. The gas station still contained Carter. These guys would have noticed Carter leaving by himself if they had been observing them. That implied they bided their time till they could seize me. Ethan was pushed by the first man in the direction of a black automobile that was parked in the alley next to the station. Enter. Ethan paused. The second man stabbed his ribs more forcefully. Get in, I said. Ethan had no other option. His mind racing for a way out, he climbed into the rear seat. The second man took the wheel, and the first slid in next to him. There was a click, and the doors locked. Then, they drove off into the darkness. 5 minutes. Ethan sat silently for that long, attempting to commit every detail to memory. Each and every street sign. Anything that would let him know their destination. At last, the man next to him said, "You simply couldn't ignore it, could you?" Ethan took a deep breath. "Who are you?" The man grinned. "It doesn't matter." Ethan gave the driver a quick look. "You are employed by the senator?" The man stopped grinning. "Quit talking." Bingo. Ethan had struck a tender spot. These were not your average kidnappers. They had something to do with the corruption he had exposed, which meant they had no intention of releasing him. Ethan inhaled deeply. He had to maintain his composure. He would make a mistake if he panicked. The laptop bag on the floor near the driver's seat caught his attention. If he was able to reach it, the driver pushed on the brakes as the car jolted and the tires screeched. The road ahead was blocked by a black SUV. Ethan's heartbeat quickened. "Carter." The door of the SUV swung open before the driver could respond. Carter then went outside. The gun went up, anger burning in the eyes. "Permit." Proceed. Carter's voice was deadly and frigid. The man next to Ethan drew a pistol and thrust it into Ethan's temple. Carter's mouth clenched. The man snarled, "I don't think you understand. You bring that rifle down, or the child is shot." Ethan breathed quickly. He was trying to think of a way out. Then Carter took an unexpected action. He grinned, suddenly suspicious. The driver's gaze flitted to the rearview mirror. "Why is it so funny?" Carter's head cocked slightly. "You guys lost the fight you were in because you brought a gun." Before the men hardly had time to comprehend those words. From behind, a second SUV crashed into them. The automobile spun after the impact. When the man next to Ethan lost his hold, Ethan took immediate action. He sprang to retrieve his laptop. As he struggled to regain control, the driver cursed. Just as the second SUV slammed to a stop next to them, Carter appeared, pulling open the door and tearing Ethan out. More guys emerged, but they weren't adversaries. They worked as agents. Carter had a fallback. There was gunfire. Ethan was pushed behind the SUV by Carter. "Remain down." Before Ethan could even react, he heard the characteristic pop, pop, pop of gunfire that had been muted. There were more men than had abducted him, and it was over in a matter of seconds. The assailants were defeated. Ethan's heart thumping was the only sound remaining. Carter grabbed his shoulder and turned to face him. "Are you all right?" Breathing heavily, Ethan nodded. "Did you set me up?" Carter grinned. "I suspected they were coming to get you. I simply had to confirm that I would be present when they arrived." He caught Ethan's attention. "You baited me?" Carter gave a shrug, and it was successful. Ethan was torn between being impressed and being angry. From the second SUV, one of the agents came over. "We must relocate. Right now." With a nod, Carter turned to face Ethan. "Hurry up, child. We haven't finished yet." Ethan took a deep breath. He understood Carter's meaning. This was only the start. They were now heading directly to the source. Directly to the senator. As if traffic laws didn't exist, the black SUVs sped down the highway, weaving in and out of other vehicles. With his laptop poised on his knees and his fingers fluttering over the keyboard, Ethan sat in the back. Now they were ahead. The files were with them. They had evidence. Most significantly, they were named. However, one significant issue remained. Unless they were able to remove the senator, none of it mattered. Carter was in the passenger seat, making quick calls in a harsh voice. "No, we have not yet gone public. We must be straightforward. They'll bury this if we don't chop off the head." Ethan took a deep breath. He knew what Carter was getting at. The senator's supporters would shut it down, distort the facts, or make it vanish if they simply disclosed the information. They had to corner him. Ethan continued. "We have to reach him before he realizes we have this." Carter gave a nod. "I'm working on it already." The driver, An agent with keen eyes and a serious expression raised his voice. "We have an issue." Carter tensed. "What?" He was given a tablet by the agent. A breaking news notice appeared in large red letters on the screen. "For cybercrimes, a teenage hacker is wanted. The FBI issues an arrest warrant." The blood in Ethan froze. Carter muttered an expletive. "They are deceiving you." As Ethan read the story, his stomach rumbled. They had portrayed him as a dangerous cybercriminal who had gained access to government networks that were classified. He was described as an immediate national security threat in the news. Even terrible, Carter was bound to him. Carter had a serious expression. "This is not good." The driving agent gave a nod. "We're falling behind. They will be instructed to detain on the spot." Ethan's fists clenched. This was just what he was afraid about. They weren't merely attempting to keep him quiet. They were ensuring that no one would take him seriously. Carter murmured, "They're severing our options." Ethan inhaled deeply. "Then we're down to one move." Carter gave him a look. "What is it?" Ethan's fingers gripped the laptop more tightly. The senator was stuck. Carter's eyebrow went up. "Do you have a plan, child?" Ethan let out a breath. "Yes, but it's dangerous." Carter grinned. "We do things that are risky." They arrived at a private airfield 30 minutes later. Engines hummed as a sleek black jet sat on the runway. Agents hurried about getting ready to take off. Perplexed, Ethan turned to face Carter. "Where are we heading?" Carter gripped his rifle tighter. Ethan's stomach turned over in Washington, D.C. The lion's den was right in front of them. Carter took hold of his arm before he could speak. "Pay attention, child. This becomes real as soon as we touch down. No more games. Stop running. We struck hard. We struck quickly. And until the truth is out, we don't give up." Ethan pushed back the panic that was rising inside of him and nodded. After climbing the stairs inside the aircraft, they were in the air in a matter of minutes. Ethan pulled up the files on his laptop. There was one final puzzle piece he had to solve, and it would be the last nail in the senator's coffin if he was correct. After inhaling deeply, he began typing. They were going directly into trouble, and now there was no going back. The tension in the cabin was oppressive as the jet sliced through dense clouds as it flew through the night sky toward Washington, D.C. Ethan's mind was racing faster than ever as his fingers moved across the keyboard. He was now creating a trap rather than merely hacking. Carter sat next to him and observed intently. "You know what you're doing, child?" As the climax was being put up, Ethan's gaze remained fixed on the television. Once more, he retrieved the senator's financial records. He wasn't merely examining the pilfered cash, though, this time. He was seeing who was getting it. Then he discovered it. He gasped for air. Carter leaned closer. "What is it?" Ethan took a deep breath. "Not all of the funds are moving to offshore accounts. It's returning in part." Carter scowled. "Tell me," Ethan said. "It is being used for something significant after passing via phony companies and shell corporations." One of the flag transactions caught his attention. A sequence of payments. Enormous sums of money. What about the recipient? A private security company. Carter's face grew serious. "It goes beyond simple laundry. Building an army is what that is." Ethan felt a knot in his stomach. He is not merely a money thief. Something is costing him money. Weapons. Men. Activities. A secret. Carter wiped his face with his hand. "I didn't realize how bad this was." Ethan gave a nod. "We are no longer merely exposing corruption." He looked into Carter's eyes. "We are preventing a coup." The team started moving as soon as the wheels touched down at a private airport outside of Washington, D.C. An hour later, Carter reloaded his firearm. "We're running out of time. They will take action to put an end to this as soon as they recognize our presence." Ethan gave a nod. "We must approach the senator." Carter paused, thinking, somewhere public where they can't easily kill us. Then he became bright-eyed. "The gala." Ethan scowled. "What's the gala?" Carter produced his phone and displayed an item to him. "This evening, Senator Richardson will give a speech at a D.C. charity event." Ethan's heartbeat quickened. The senator would be seen by the public, before a crowd of hundreds. It was the ideal opportunity. Ethan closed his laptop. "After that, we attend the gala." Carter grinned. "One troublesome child. At upscale occasions, you don't quite fit in." Ethan let out a breath. Then I suppose a makeover is in order. Ethan was standing in front of a mirror 1 hour later, adjusting a stolen tuxedo's cuffs. He murmured, "This is dumb." Carter, he was mending his own tie, grinned. "Calm down, child. You appear almost normal." Ethan gave an eye roll. "What is the strategy?" Carter's expression darkened. "You enter. Don't be caught, and follow the plan." Ethan gave a nod. "Correct." Carter took a quick look at his watch. Showtime is almost here. Ethan inhaled deeply. It was this, the last action, and if they succeeded in doing so, the senator was done. They entered the opulent ballroom. Overhead, chandeliers gleam. There were prominent visitors, politicians, and business people in the room. Everyone was laughing and grinning, utterly unaware of what was going to unfold. Ethan looked around the throng. Then, he caught sight of him, Richardson, senator, standing in the middle of the space, laughing and shaking hands, totally oblivious to the impending fall of his business. Ethan felt his heart race. The time had come. He took his phone out, pressed a button, then forwarded the files to all of the nation's major news outlets. But before he was able to breathe at all, his shoulder was seized by a solid hand. His blood froze. He pivoted and discovered a figure in black standing just in front of him. No facial expression. Without hesitation, just purpose to kill. The man muttered, "Kid, you should never have come here." Before Ethan could respond, the man reached inside his jacket and produced a firearm. The world slowed for Ethan. With surgical accuracy, the man in black pulled his gun. He held on firmly, too steady. An expert. Ethan's intellect yelled for him to move, but his body froze. However, he was immobilized, gazing into a silencer's barrel. Next, boom. It wasn't the assassin's gun, though. His body gave a powerful jerk. He felt a gunshot strike his chest. He relaxed his hold. His sword fell to the marble floor with a thud. Before Ethan could even process what had happened, he was jerked backward by a powerful hand. "Carter, get moving." He let out a bark. Chaos broke out in the ballroom. The guests let out a yell, running for shelter. Security hurried in. They had their weapons out, searching for the shooting's origin. Ethan felt his heart race. Who fired the shot? Carter remained silent. He was looking around the room already, trying to figure out what to do next. Then again, over the speakers in the ballroom came a fresh voice. "Gentlemen and ladies." The senator was the one. Ethan's head jerked in the direction of the magnificent stage. He was there, Richardson, senator, occupying the podium. "Be calm." Written over the crowd, his icy blue gaze found Ethan. His lips curved into a slow grin. Ethan felt sick to his stomach. He is aware. Richardson straightened his necktie. Smoothly, he apologized for the disruption, as though nothing had occurred. "We have a trespasser, it appears." Carter muttered an expletive. "We must leave. Right now." Ethan gave a headshake. His hands clenched in a fist instead. "We are completing this." Carter looked at him sternly. "Youngster, we have no backup." Ethan's heart pounded. "We don't require it." After inhaling deeply, he moved forward. As Ethan came out of the crowd, the senator arched an eyebrow. "Oh, the prodigy himself." The room fell silent. The stage was encircled by security personnel. They were holding their holsters in their palms. Ethan paid them no attention. He took his phone out, displaying it for all to see. Richardson continued to grin. "Do you believe that a phone will deter me?" Ethan grinned. Not merely a phone. He gave the screen a tap, and all of a sudden, all of the ballroom's screens flared to life. Projectors, televisions, smartphones, tablets, each and every one. Additionally, on each and every screen, the proof was played. Records, snippets from videos, bank records, tapes that were leaked, the entire color of the truth. For all the politicians, reporters, and guests to see. Throughout the ballroom, there were gasps. A man spilled his glass of champagne toward the front of the room. Already delivering the shocking news to her station, a reporter gripped her earpiece. Ethan spoke quietly. "This is who you truly are," he remarked, pointing to the screens. The senator's expression grew gloomy. He appeared rattled for the first time. Carter moved to Ethan's side. It appears that what you've been hiding was suddenly revealed to the entire nation. The senator clenched his jaw. His eyes went to his security detail. Take him into custody. However, nobody made a move because he was now being filmed. The entire globe was observing. Any incorrect action would simply serve to prove his guilt. Richardson's breathing was deliberate and slow, and his fists were clenched. Then a chilly smile curved his lips. He muttered, leaning slightly toward Ethan, so that he alone could hear. "Kid, you don't get it." He spoke in a gentle, yet lethal tone. "Do men like me? We don't end up behind bars." His eyes were pierced by Ethan's. "You will." Then the room was filled with FBI agents. People yelled, "You are being arrested, Senator Richardson." The shackles clicked around the senator's wrists, and he hardly moved. His face stayed composed. However, his eyes, they were blazing with fury. He gave one more warning in a whisper as he was pulled away. "It's not over yet." Ethan did not recoil. "Yeah," he replied. Richardson had left. It was over in an instant. A few hours later, Ethan and Carter watched the sunrise from outside the Capitol building. Overnight, the world had altered. The story was being covered by news outlets. The government was in disarray. The investigations were beginning. At last, the truth was known. Ethan drew a long breath. "What comes next?" Carter grinned. "Right now, you return home." Ethan blinked. "Like that?" Carter gave a shrug. "You fulfilled your role. One of the strongest men in the nation was overthrown by you." He gave a small smile. "Not bad for a child." Ethan let out a breath. "Yes, not too awful." He looked across at Carter. "How about you? How do you fare?" Carter laughed. "Me? I'll be all right. I always am." Ethan gave a nod. He was aware that they would most likely never cross paths again. However, that was all right. For Ethan, Walker was free immediately. Not afraid, not having to run, free to be himself at last. He was certain of one thing as he left, the sun rising behind him. He had changed from being the quiet kid in the back of the class. He was the child who made all the difference. And that was only the start.